The gunshot echoed through the canyon as Zara Holloway pressed her back against the rocky outcropping, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood seeped through her fingers where she clutched her side, staining her once pristine riding skirt a dark crimson. Montana Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman alone, but circumstances had left her little choice in the matter. "They're coming," she whispered, more to herself than to the tall stranger who had appeared from nowhere moments earlier, his Winchester rifle already smoking from the covering fire he'd laid down. "Not if I have anything to say about it, madam," the man replied, his voice steady despite the precarious situation. He was tall and weather-beaten, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a jawline that could have been carved from the very rocks they sheltered behind. The silver star pinned to his vest caught the late afternoon sun. "Save your bullets, cowboy," Zara said bitterly, wincing as she shifted her weight. "Those are Harlan Dobbs' men. They won't stop until we're both dead. Name's Kirk Lawson, Deputy U.S. "Marshal," he corrected, tipping his hat briefly before peering around the edge of the rock. "And I don't plan on dying today." Zara laughed, a hollow sound that held no mirth. "No one cares if we die," she said, her voice breaking. "Not out here." Kirk turned to her then, his eyes locking with hers, something fierce and determined burning in their depths. "I do," he said simply. "So we ain't dying today." The shouts of their pursuers grew closer, and Kirk helped Zara to her feet. "Can you ride?" he asked, nodding toward his dun-colored horse waiting patiently nearby. "I've been riding since before I could walk," she answered, gritting her teeth against the pain. "But they'll track us. Harlan has the best trackers in the territory." "Then we'll just have to be clever," Kirk replied, helping her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. "Hold tight, Miss Holloway. Zara Holloway." "Hold tight, Miss Holloway," he repeated, spurring his horse forward. "This is going to be one hell of a ride." As they galloped away from the canyon, Zara couldn't help but wonder if this stranger's confidence was misplaced. No one had ever stood between her and trouble before. Everyone she'd ever loved had either died or abandoned her. But there was something about the steadiness of Kirk Lawson's arm around her waist that made her wonder if perhaps, just this once, she might not have to face her demons alone. The sun was setting over the Montana plains, painting the landscape in fiery hues of orange and red as Kirk guided his horse toward a small creek bed. He'd been pushing hard for the past hour, but now he slowed, allowing the horse to catch its breath. "We need to tend to that wound," he said, his breath warm against Zara's ear, "and throw them off our trail." Zara nodded weakly. The initial rush of fear had worn off, leaving only exhaustion and pain in its wake. "There's a small cabin," she managed, "about 2 miles north of here. Belongs to an old trapper named Gus. He died last winter." Kirk considered this information might be the first place they look, or they might think we'd never be foolish enough to go there, Zara countered, a smile tugged at the corner of Kirk's mouth. "I like the way you think, Miss Holloway." They reached the cabin as the last light faded from the sky. It was a humble structure, just one room with a small lean-to attached, but it was shelter. Kirk helped Zara dismount, supporting her weight as they approached the door. Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact. A cast iron stove sat in one corner, and a narrow bed frame occupied another. Kirk eased Zara onto a rickety chair before setting about making a fire in the stove. "Let me see that wound," he said once he had a small flame going. Zara hesitated, then slowly moved her hand away from her side. The bullet had grazed her, tearing through her dress and the flesh beneath. It was painful but not life-threatening. Kirk nodded as if confirming his own assessment. "You're lucky. It's just a graze." He rummaged through his saddlebags, producing a flask of whiskey and a clean bandana. "This is going to sting." Zara clenched her jaw as he cleaned the wound with whiskey, refusing to make a sound. When he was finished, he wrapped the bandana around her middle, his touch gentle despite his calloused hands. "Thank you," she said softly when he was done, "but you should leave me." Harlan won't stop until I'm dead, and there's no reason for you to get caught in the crossfire. Kirk looked at her steadily. What kind of man would I be if I left a wounded woman to fend for herself? A sensible one, Zara replied. Never been accused of that. Kirk smiled briefly. Now, why don't you tell me why Harlan Dobbs wants you dead? Zara sighed, the weight of her situation pressing down on her. I witnessed him murder a man in cold blood, a rancher named Thompson who refused to sell his land. She looked down at her hands, now clean of blood but still trembling. I was working as a schoolteacher in Clearwater. Thompson's daughter was one of my students. Kirk's expression darkened. Dobbs has been buying up land all over the territory. Rumor has it he's in league with the railroad. It's not just a rumor, Zara said. I found documents in Thompson's house after it happened. Letters proving Dobbs is working with Eastern investors to secure land ahead of the railroad's expansion. And Dobbs knows you have these documents? Zara nodded. They're why he's hunting me, why he won't stop until I'm dead. Kirk was silent for a long moment. Where are these documents now? Hidden, Zara replied. In a place only I know. Kirk nodded, respecting her caution. Get some rest, I'll keep watch. As Zara settled onto the narrow bed, Kirk took up position by the window, his rifle across his knees. Outside, the Montana night was alive with sounds the whisper of wind through prairie grass, the distant howl of a wolf, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. But nothing human. Not yet. Zara watched Kirk's profile, outlined against the moonlight streaming through the window. Why are you really helping me? She asked softly. Kirk didn't turn from his vigil. Because it's right, he said simply. And because I've been tracking Dobbs myself for the past 6 months, he killed my partner in Wyoming territory. Zara absorbed this information. So this is about revenge. Justice, Kirk corrected. Though sometimes the line between the two gets mighty thin. Sleep came in fitful bursts for Zara, her dreams haunted by the memory of Thompson's murder, the crack of the gunshot, the spray of blood, the cold smile on Harlan Dobbs' face as he stood over the dying rancher. Each time she woke, she found Kirk still at his post, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the cabin. Dawn broke clear and cold. Kirk had managed to find some coffee in the cabin's meager supplies, and the smell of it brewing roused Zara from her latest bout of restless sleep. How's the side? Kirk asked, pouring her a cup of the strong, black coffee. Painful, Zara admitted, but I'll manage. Kirk nodded approvingly. We should move soon. They'll be searching at first light. Where will we go? I have friends at Fort Kearney, Kirk said. It's 3 days' ride, but we'll be safe there. From there, we can get those documents to the territorial governor. Zara sipped her coffee, considering. And then what? Then Dobbs faces justice, Kirk said firmly. For Thompson, for my partner, for trying to kill you. Before Zara could respond, Kirk held up a hand, suddenly alert. Outside, a twig snapped. Then came the unmistakable sound of a horse's snort. They found us, Zara whispered, fear clutching at her heart. Kirk moved swiftly, extinguishing the lamp and motioning for Zara to get down. Stay low, he instructed, moving to the window and peering out carefully. How many? Zara asked, her voice barely audible. 3 that I can see, Kirk replied. Probably more in the trees. Zara felt a surge of despair. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and she was injured. The odds were not in their favor. There's a cellar, she said suddenly, remembering. Under the floorboards, Gus used it to store furs. Kirk glanced at her, a new respect in his eyes. Show me. Together, they located the trapdoor beneath a worn rug. Kirk helped Zara down into the small, earthen space before joining her, pulling the trapdoor shut above them just as the cabin door burst open in the darkness of the cellar. Zara and Kirk pressed close together, listening to the heavy footsteps of Dobbs' men above them. Dust filtered down from the floorboards with each step, and Zara fought the urge to cough. Check everything, a gruff voice commanded. They can't have gone far, not with her wounded. The men tore through the cabin, appending furniture and smashing whatever they couldn't quickly search. Zara closed her eyes, willing her racing heart to quiet. Beside her, Kirk's hand found hers in the darkness, his grip firm and reassuring. After what seemed like an eternity, the men departed, their horses' hooves fading into the distance. Still, Kirk and Zara remained in their hiding place, waiting to ensure it wasn't a trick. "They'll be back," Kirk said softly. "We need to move as soon as it's clear." Zara nodded, then realized he couldn't see her in the darkness. "Yes," she whispered. When they finally emerged from the cellar, the cabin was in shambles. Kirk quickly gathered what supplies he could salvage, while Zara changed into a pair of trousers she found among the old trapper's belongings. They were too large, but she secured them with a length of rope and rolled up the legs. A worn flannel shirt completed her transformation. "Easier to ride," she explained when Kirk raised an eyebrow, "and less conspicuous than a blood-stained dress." Kirk nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking." They left the cabin cautiously, Kirk leading his horse through the trees rather than riding, to minimize their tracks. Only when they reached a rocky outcropping where the horse's hooves wouldn't leave clear prints did they mount up, Zara sitting behind Kirk this time, her arms around his waist. "We'll head east initially," Kirk explained as they rode. "Make them think we're going toward Clearwater, then we'll double back and head north to Fort Kearney." For hours, they rode in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The Montana landscape stretched out around them, vast and beautiful in its wildness. Under different circumstances, Zara might have found it breathtaking. Now, she saw only potential danger in every cluster of trees, every rocky ridge. By midday, they had reached a high plateau overlooking a winding river. Kirk reined in his horse, scanning the horizon. "No sign of pursuit," he said, though his tone suggested this didn't reassure him. "We'll rest here for a bit. Horse needs water." They dismounted, and Kirk led the horse down to the river while Zara sank gratefully onto a sun-warmed rock. Her side throbbed, but the bleeding had stopped, and she was determined not to slow them down. "You're handling this well," Kirk observed when he returned, offering her his canteen. Most city women would be hysterical by now. Zara took a drink before responding. "I wasn't always a schoolteacher," she said. "My father was a doctor during the war. I helped him in the field hospitals." Kirk's eyebrows rose slightly. "That explains a lot." "What about you?" Zara asked. "How does a man become a U.S.? Marshal?" Kirk's expression grew distant. "I fought in the war too. Afterward, I drifted west like a lot of men, worked as a scout for the Army, then as a deputy in Cheyenne. The Marshal Service recruited me 3 years ago. And your partner, the one Dobbs killed?" "Samuel Jenkins," Kirk said, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Good man. Too good for what happened to him." Zara didn't press further. She recognized the look of grief. She'd seen it in her father's eyes too many times during the war, and later, in her own reflection after his death. They continued their journey as the afternoon wore on, the sun beating down mercilessly. Kirk was a skilled tracker, choosing their path carefully to minimize signs of their passage. By nightfall, they had reached a small, sheltered canyon with a freshwater spring. "We'll camp here," Kirk decided. "It's defensible, and there's water and grass for the horse." While Kirk gathered firewood, Zara used the last of the daylight to examine her wound. It was healing clean with no sign of infection. Small mercies. Their dinner was simple jerky and hardtack from Kirk's saddlebags, but Zara was too tired to care. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire between them. "Tell me about Clearwater," Kirk said eventually. "What made you decide to become a schoolteacher there?" Zara smiled wistfully. "After my father died, I needed a fresh start. I answered an advertisement in a Chicago newspaper. Teacher wanted for frontier settlement. It seemed as good a place as any to disappear." "Disappear from what?" Zara hesitated, then decided honesty was the least she owed this man who was risking his life for her. "My fiancé died at Gettysburg. Afterward, I couldn't bear the pity in everyone's eyes, the constant reminders." Kirk nodded, understanding in his gaze. "War has a way of following you, even when it's over." "Yes," Zara agreed softly, But in Clearwater, no one knew my history. I could just be Miss Holloway, the schoolteacher. And now, Zara stared into the flames, now I don't know what I'll be if we survive this. We'll survive, Kirk said firmly, and then you'll be whatever you want to be. Zara looked at him across the fire, really looked at him for the first time. In the flickering light, the hard lines of his face softened, and she could see the man beneath the marshal's stern exterior. A good man, she thought, a rare thing in these harsh territories. We should get some sleep, Kirk said, breaking the moment. I'll take first watch. Zara nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Using Kirk's saddle as a pillow, she wrapped herself in a blanket and closed her eyes. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Kirk's silhouette against the star-filled sky, steady and vigilant. She woke to his hand on her shoulder, gentle but urgent. We need to move, he whispered. I heard riders. Instantly alert, Zara sat up. The fire had burned down to embers, and the eastern sky held the first hint of dawn. How many? She asked, already gathering her few belongings. Can't tell, but they're moving fast, coming from the south. They broke camp quickly and efficiently, leaving no trace of their presence. Within minutes, they were mounted and moving, Kirk guiding his horse along a rocky ridge where their tracks would be difficult to follow. As the sun rose, they caught glimpses of their pursuers, 4 riders, pushing their horses hard. Dobbs' men, undoubtedly. They're tracking better than I expected, Kirk muttered. We need to find a way to lose them. Ahead, the land dropped away into a dense forest. The trees, Zara suggested. We can lose them in there. Kirk nodded, urging his horse toward the tree line. Once among the pines, they dismounted, and Kirk led the horse, careful to avoid breaking branches or leaving obvious signs of their passage. The forest was cool and dim, sunlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. It would have been peaceful if not for the constant threat of pursuit. They moved as quietly as possible, pausing often to listen for sounds of the men following them. There's a stream ahead, Kirk whispered after they had been walking for nearly an hour. We can use it to throw them off. The stream was swift and clear, running over smooth stones. Kirk led his horse into the water, and they waded upstream for several hundred yards before emerging onto a rocky bank that would hold no footprints. That should buy us some time, Kirk said, helping Zara remount. But we need to keep moving. They'll figure it out eventually. They rode hard throughout the day, stopping only when necessary to rest the horse. By late afternoon, they had covered significant ground, and there was no sign of pursuit. Still, Kirk remained cautious, choosing their path carefully and frequently checking behind them. As the sun began to set, they came upon a small homestead nestled in a valley. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a few chickens pecked in the yard. We could ask for help, Zara suggested. Kirk shook his head. Too risky. We don't know these people. They might turn us in for a reward. Or they might be decent folk who'd help a U.S. Marshal and a woman in trouble, Zara countered. Before Kirk could respond, the decision was made for them. A young boy, no more than 10, spotted them from the yard and called out to someone inside the house. A moment later, a man emerged, rifle in hand. That's far enough, strangers, he called. State your business. Kirk raised his hands to show he meant no harm. My name is Kirk Lawson, U.S., Marshal. This is Miss Zara Holloway. We're in a bit of trouble and could use a place to rest for the night. The man studied them suspiciously. Got any proof you're a marshal? Kirk slowly reached into his vest and produced his badge. The man examined it from a distance, then lowered his rifle slightly. I'm Daniel Peterson, he said. That's my boy Thomas, and my wife Martha is inside. You say you're in trouble? Yes, sir, Kirk replied. We're being pursued by men working for Harlan Dobbs. Daniel's expression darkened at the mention of Dobbs' name. That snake tried to buy my land last year, offered a pittance. He gestured toward the house. Come on, then. Any enemy of Dobbs is a friend of mine. Inside, the Peterson homestead was modest but comfortable. Martha, a kind-faced woman with flour-dusted hands, welcomed them warmly despite her initial surprise. She set about preparing extra food while Daniel showed Kirk and Zara where they could wash up. "You're hurt," Martha observed when she noticed Zara's bandaged side. "Let me look at that." While Martha tended to Zara's wound with a poultice of herbs that smelled strongly of mint, Kirk explained their situation to Daniel. The farmer listened gravely. "Dobbs has been causing trouble all over these parts," Daniel said. "Buying land, forcing people out. Those who won't sell have a habit of meeting with accidents." "Not accidents," Kirk said grimly. "Murder," Daniel nodded. "We suspected as much, but without proof." "That's what we have," Zara interjected. "Proof. Documents showing Dobbs' connection to the railroad and Eastern investors. Letters detailing plans to drive out ranchers and farmers who won't sell." "That's why they're after us," Kirk added. "Those documents could put Dobbs behind bars." Daniel exchanged a look with his wife. "You're welcome to stay the night," he said. "But you should know Dobbs has men everywhere. It's not safe for you to linger." "We'll leave at first light," Kirk promised. "We're headed to Fort Kearney." "That's still 2 days hard riding from here," Daniel warned. "And there's rough country between." "We'll manage," Kirk said with a confidence Zara wasn't sure she felt. After a hearty meal of venison stew and freshly baked bread, Martha showed Zara to a small bedroom while Daniel set up a pallet for Kirk near the fire. Despite her exhaustion, Zara found sleep elusive. The events of the past few days replayed in her mind the horror of witnessing Thompson's murder, the terror of being hunted, and the unexpected appearance of Kirk Lawson, who had risked everything to help her. And now, the Petersons had put themselves at risk as well. So many lives entangled in this dangerous web, all because of what she had seen and what she knew. A soft knock at her door roused her from these dark thoughts. It was Martha, bearing a cup of steaming tea. "Thought you might have trouble sleeping," the farmer's wife said kindly. "This will help." Zara accepted the tea gratefully. "Thank you for everything." Martha sat on the edge of the bed. "Your Marshal, he seems like a good man." "He's not my Marshal," Zara corrected automatically, then felt heat rise to her cheeks at Martha's knowing smile. "Maybe not," Martha conceded. "But I see how he looks at you, and how you look at him." Zara stared into her tea, unsure how to respond. Was it that obvious? She hardly knew Kirk Lawson, and yet there was something between them, a connection forged in danger and mutual dependence, perhaps, but no less real for that. "It's complicated," Zara said finally. Martha patted her hand. "Life usually is, dear, especially out here." She rose to leave. "Drink your tea. Morning comes early on a farm." The tea was sweetened with honey and had a calming effect. Zara found herself drifting off, her last thoughts of Kirk Lawson's steady presence and the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. She woke before dawn to the sounds of activity in the main room. Dressing quickly, she found the Petersons and Kirk already up, preparing for the day ahead. "Martha's packed you some food," Daniel said, handing Kirk a canvas sack. "And I've drawn you a map to Fort Kearney. There's a shortcut through Miller's Pass that could save you half a day's ride." "We're grateful," Kirk said, shaking the farmer's hand. Thomas approached Zara shyly, holding something out to her. It was a small, carved wooden horse. "For luck," the boy said. Touched, Zara knelt to accept the gift. "Thank you, Thomas. I'll treasure it." Outside, the world was still shrouded in pre-dawn darkness. Kirk checked his saddle and gear while Daniel brought his horse around from the barn. "Fresh and rested," Daniel said, patting the horse's neck. "He'll carry you both well today." They mounted up, Zara behind Kirk once more, and said their final goodbyes to the Peterson family. As they rode away from the homestead, Zara felt a pang of sadness. The Petersons represented everything she had come to love about frontier life, the resilience, the generosity, the sense of community among those carving out an existence in this harsh but beautiful land. "They're good people," Kirk said, as if reading her thoughts. "Yes," Zara agreed. "I hope we haven't brought trouble to their door." Kirk's expression was grim. "So do I." They rode in silence as the sun rose, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. According to Daniel's map, Miller's Pass lay about 15 miles to the northwest, a narrow canyon that cut through a range of hills rather than going around them. The morning passed uneventfully, but as they approached the hills that marked the beginning of the pass, Kirk grew increasingly alert, frequently scanning their surroundings. "Something wrong?" Zara asked. "Not sure," Kirk replied. "Just a feeling." Zara had learned to trust Kirk's instincts over the past days. Should we avoid the pass? Kirk considered this. It would add hours to our journey, but before he could finish, a gunshot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt just ahead of their horse. The animal reared in fright, nearly unseating them both. Kirk managed to control the horse and spurred it toward a cluster of boulders, drawing his revolver as they took cover. "Ambush," he said grimly. "They must have guessed our destination and gotten ahead of us." More shots followed, pinging off the rocks around them. Zara counted at least 3 different shooters from the direction and timing of the gunfire. "We're pinned down," Kirk muttered, returning fire sparingly. "They've got the high ground." Zara felt a familiar despair rising within her. "No one cares if we die," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Kirk turned to her, his eyes fierce and determined. "I do," he said firmly, "so we ain't dying today." The conviction in his voice steadied her. "What's the plan?" Kirk peered around the boulder, ducking back as a bullet chipped stone near his head. "There's a ravine to our left. If we can reach it, it might lead us out of this trap." Zara nodded, gathering her courage. "Ready when you are." "On my mark," Kirk said. 3, 2, 1, now." They burst from behind the boulder, Kirk firing rapidly to provide covering fire as they ran toward the ravine. Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet, but they reached the edge of the ravine and half ran, half slid down its steep side. At the bottom, they found themselves in a dry creek bed, sheltered from direct fire by the ravine's high walls. Kirk's horse had followed them, spooked but unhurt. "Which way?" Zara gasped, trying to catch her breath. Kirk glanced in both directions. "West. It should lead away from the pass." He helped her onto the horse before mounting behind her. "Hold on tight." They galloped along the creek bed, the ravine's walls providing cover from the men above. Behind them, shouts of frustration echoed as their pursuers realized their quarry was escaping. The ravine twisted and turned, gradually widening into a broader valley. When they were well out of range of the ambush, Kirk slowed the horse to a walk, allowing the animal to recover. "That was too close," Zara said, her heart still racing. "They're getting desperate," Kirk agreed. "Which means we're running out of time." They consulted Daniel's map, trying to determine their position. The ambush had forced them off course, but not disastrously so. Fort Kearney was still to the north, perhaps a day and a half's ride. "We'll need to be more careful," Kirk said. "Stick to cover where possible, avoid open ground." They continued their journey, now hyper-vigilant for signs of another trap. The landscape grew more rugged as they traveled, with pine forests giving way to rocky highlands. By late afternoon, they had reached a high plateau that offered a sweeping view of the territory ahead. "We'll camp here," Kirk decided. "Good visibility in all directions." They made a cold camp, not risking a fire that might be spotted. As they shared the food Martha had packed for them, Zara found herself studying Kirk's profile against the setting sun. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that reassured her even in their desperate circumstances. "Why did you become a marshal?" she asked suddenly. Kirk looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. "After the war, I felt lost, like many men did. Riding with the marshal service gave me purpose again, a way to use what I'd learned in the war for something good." "And is it good?" "Most days," Kirk said with a slight smile. "Days like today, when I'm trying to help someone who deserves it, those are the good ones. Even when it might get you killed," Zara pressed. Kirk's gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. "Some things are worth the risk." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Zara found herself leaning toward him almost unconsciously, drawn by something she couldn't name. A distant sound, the crack of a twig, perhaps broke the moment. Kirk was instantly alert, hand going to his revolver. "Stay here," he whispered, rising to his feet. Zara watched anxiously as Kirk moved silently toward the edge of their camp, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Minutes stretched endlessly as she waited for his return, straining to hear any sound of confrontation. When he finally emerged from the shadows, his expression was grim. "Riders." About half a mile out, moving slowly like they're searching, Zara's heart sank. "Dobbs' men, most likely," Kirk confirmed. "We need to move. Now." They packed quickly and mounted up, Kirk guiding the horse carefully along the plateau's edge to avoid silhouetting themselves against the night sky. Below, they could see the pinpricks of lantern light as the riders spread out, methodically searching the area. "How do they keep finding us?" Zara whispered in frustration. "I don't know," Kirk admitted, "but we can't keep running forever. We need to reach Fort Kearney." They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horse. Dawn found them descending from the highlands into a broad, grassy valley. In the distance, Zara could make out the silvery ribbon of a river. The North Platte, Kirk identified it. Fort Kearney is built along its banks, about 20 miles downstream. For the first time in days, Zara felt a flicker of hope. "We might make it after all." Kirk nodded cautiously. "If we can reach the river, we can follow it to the fort. It's our best chance." They rode hard through the morning, the vast openness of the valley making Zara feel exposed and vulnerable after the shelter of the highlands. By midday, they had reached the river, its waters flowing swift and clear between grassy banks. Kirk dismounted, leading the horse to the water to drink. "We'll rest here for a bit, then follow the river east." Zara slid from the saddle, her muscles protesting after the long ride. Her side ached where the bullet had grazed her, though the wound was healing well thanks to Martha's poultice. She knelt by the river, splashing cool water on her face and neck. The simple pleasure of being alive, of having made it this far, struck her suddenly. She laughed, a sound of genuine joy that surprised even her. Kirk looked at her curiously. "Something funny, just grateful," Zara explained. "A week ago, I thought my life was over, and now—" She gestured at the beautiful landscape around them. "Now I'm here with you, and for the first time, I believe we might actually survive this." Kirk's expression softened. "We will," he promised. "And when this is over, when Dobbs is behind bars, what then? Will you go back to teaching in Clearwater?" The question caught Zara off guard. She hadn't allowed herself to think beyond survival, beyond reaching Fort Kearney with the documents that would prove Dobbs' crimes. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't go back to Clearwater. Even with Dobbs in prison, there would be those loyal to him." "You could go anywhere," Kirk pointed out. "Start fresh." Zara looked at him thoughtfully. "What about you? After you've brought Dobbs to justice, what then?" Kirk shrugged. "Back to my duties, I suppose. There's always another outlaw, another case." "Alone." The word slipped out before Zara could stop it. Kirk held her gaze for a long moment. "That depends," he said softly. The intensity in his eyes made Zara's breath catch. There was a question there, unasked but clear nonetheless. Before she could respond, however, the sound of gunfire shattered the moment. A bullet struck the ground near them, sending up a spray of dirt and stones. Kirk reacted instantly, pulling Zara down and drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. "The trees," he said urgently, indicating a line of cottonwoods along the riverbank. "Go," they ran, keeping low as more bullets whizzed past. Kirk's horse bolted in panic, disappearing upstream. They reached the trees and took cover behind a massive fallen trunk, Kirk returning fire as Dobbs' men advanced. "How many?" Zara gasped. "5, maybe 6, Kirk replied grimly. "And they've got us pinned against the river." Zara's mind raced, assessing their options. The river was too swift to cross safely. Running upstream or downstream would leave them exposed. Fighting seemed impossible against such odds. "We're trapped," she realized, despair threatening to overwhelm her. "Not yet," Kirk said determinedly. He reached into his saddlebag, which he had grabbed before their horse fled, and pulled out a small metal object. "Signal mirror," he explained. "If we can reflect sunlight toward Fort Kearney, there's a chance a patrol might see it." It was a slim hope, but better than none. While Kirk continued to exchange fire with their pursuers, Zara took the mirror and angled it to catch the sun, sending flashes of light eastward toward the fort. "They're moving to surround us," Kirk warned, his voice tight. He was down to his last few bullets, using them sparingly. The afternoon wore on, a tense stalemate developing. Their attackers were cautious, unwilling to rush the tree line directly. Occasionally, one would fire, forcing Kirk and Zara to keep their heads down. The signal mirror continued to flash its silent plea for help. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, Zara's arms ached from holding the mirror, and her hope dwindled. Kirk had fallen silent, conserving his last bullets. The attackers seemed content to wait, knowing their quarry was trapped. "It's not working," Zara said finally, lowering the mirror. "No one's coming." Kirk's face was grim but determined. "We're not finished yet." "What options do we have left?" Zara asked, fighting to keep the despair from her voice. Kirk considered for a moment. "After dark, we might be able to slip away along the river. The current's too strong to swim, but we could wade along the edge, using the bank for cover." It was dangerous. One misstep could send them into the swift current, but it was a plan. Zara nodded her agreement. As they waited for darkness, Zara found herself thinking of all the things she might never do, never see. She thought of the small wooden horse Thomas had given her, still tucked safely in her pocket. She thought of Martha's knowing smile when she spoke of how Zara and Kirk looked at each other. And she thought of Kirk himself, his courage, his integrity, the way he had risked everything to help her. "Kirk," she said softly, decision crystallizing within her. "If we don't make it, we will," he interrupted firmly. "But if we don't," Zara insisted, "I need you to know. These past days, traveling with you despite the danger, they've meant something to me. You've meant something." Kirk's expression softened, the hard lines of vigilance giving way to something warmer. "Zara," he began, her name a caress on his lips. A shout from the direction of their pursuers cut him off, but it wasn't a shout of triumph, it was alarm. Gunfire erupted, but not directed at their position. Confused, Kirk risked a peek around their shelter. "What is it?" Zara whispered. A slow smile spread across Kirk's face. "Cavalry," he said. "From Fort Kearney." The signal worked. Relief flooded through Zara, so intense she felt lightheaded. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder as the cavalry unit drove off Dobbs' men. Within minutes, a young lieutenant was dismounting near their position, calling out reassurances. Marshal Lawson. "Miss Holloway, I'm Lieutenant Wilson, 7th Cavalry. We spotted your signal." Kirk helped Zara to her feet, and they emerged from their shelter. The lieutenant's men had captured 2 of Dobbs' gang, the others had fled. "How did you know our names?" Kirk asked, still cautious. "We received a telegraph from the territorial governor 2 days ago," Lieutenant Wilson explained, "warning us that Harlan Dobbs' men were hunting a U.S. Marshal and a witness to murder. When we saw the signal, we hoped it might be you." The ride to Fort Kearney was a blur for Zara. Exhaustion, relief, and the lingering tension of their ordeal left her numb. She rode double with Kirk on a horse provided by the cavalry, her arms around his waist, her cheek resting against his back. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of Kirk's body lulled her into a state of half-sleep. Fort Kearney appeared on the horizon as the last light faded from the sky, a collection of wooden buildings surrounded by a palisade wall, lanterns glowing in windows like earthbound stars. To Zara, it was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. They were greeted at the fort's gate by the commander, Colonel James Browning, a stern-faced man with a silver-streaked beard. "Marshal Lawson," he said, clasping Kirk's hand, "and Miss Holloway, we've been concerned for your safety." Inside the fort's walls, they were shown to separate quarters. A kindly older woman, the wife of one of the officers, helped Zara bathe, and provided her with clean clothes, a simple blue dress that was slightly too large but blessedly free of dust, blood, and memory. After a proper meal, the first in days, Zara found herself in Colonel Browning's office with Kirk. The documents that had cost so much to protect were spread across the colonel's desk. "These are conclusive," Colonel Browning said, examining the papers. "Proof of conspiracy, land fraud, and in conjunction with Miss Holloway's testimony, murder. Dobbs won't escape justice this time." "What happens now?" Zara asked, feeling oddly detached from the proceedings. "I've sent a telegraph to the territorial governor," the colonel explained. "He's dispatching federal marshals to arrest Dobbs. In the meantime, you'll both remain here under our protection." Kirk nodded, satisfaction evident in his posture. "And Miss Holloway's safety afterward? Dobbs has a long reach." "The governor has suggested a new identity, a new location," Colonel Browning said, looking at Zara. "Until the trial is concluded, at least." The reality of what that meant sank in. A new name, a new town, leaving behind everything once again, including Kirk. "I understand," Zara said softly. After the meeting, Kirk walked Zara back to her quarters. The fort was quiet, most of its occupants already retired for the night. They walked slowly, neither seeming eager for the day to end. "So, a new identity," Kirk said finally, breaking the silence. "Yes," Zara replied, unable to read his expression in the dim lantern light. "It seems prudent." Kirk stopped walking, turning to face her. "Zara, what you said by the river, before the cavalry arrived, did you mean it?" Zara's heart quickened. "Every word," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. Kirk took a step closer. "These past days, they've meant something to me too. You've meant something." The space between them seemed charged with possibility. Kirk reached out, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from Zara's face. "I've spent 3 years with the Marshals, moving from town to town, case to case, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. I told myself it was the job, that it was what I wanted." "And now?" Zara asked, barely breathing. "Now I'm not so sure," Kirk admitted. "For the first time, I'm thinking about after. About what comes next." Zara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "And what do you want to come next?" "You," Kirk said simply. "If you'll have me." The word hung between them, a promise and a question. Zara's answer was to step forward, closing the distance between them. Kirk's arms encircled her, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, Kirk rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure this out," he promised. "Together." Zara smiled, hope blossoming within her for the first time in years. "Together," she agreed. The next 2 weeks at Fort Kearney passed in a strange mixture of tension and joy. During the days, Zara worked with Kirk and a territorial judge who had arrived to take her formal deposition about Thompson's murder. The work was grim but necessary, reliving the horror of that day in careful detail. But the evenings were theirs. They would walk the perimeter of the fort, talking about everything and nothing. Kirk told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his experiences during the war, his decision to head west afterward. Zara shared stories of her father, of teaching in Clearwater, of the hopes and dreams she had set aside during the dark days after her fiancé's death. Slowly, a future began to take shape in their conversations. Not a Deputy U.S. Marshal constantly on the move, not a schoolteacher in hiding, but something new, something they would build together. "I've been thinking," Kirk said one evening as they watched the sunset from the fort's western wall. "About what comes after the trial." Zara looked at him curiously. "What have you been thinking?" "I've got some money saved. Enough to buy a small spread, maybe in the Colorado Territory, somewhere beautiful like this." He gestured at the landscape before them, painted in golds and purples by the setting sun. "Somewhere we could put down roots." The word sent a thrill through Zara. "You'd leave the Marshals," Kirk nodded. "For the right reason, yes." News came in the 3rd week. Harlan Dobbs had been arrested at his ranch outside Clearwater. His men had scattered, some also captured, others fleeing the territory. The documents Zara had protected, combined with her testimony and that of others who had been intimidated into silence, ensured that Dobbs would face trial for murder, conspiracy, and fraud. "It's over," Kirk said when they received the news. "You're safe now." That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, Kirk asked Zara to marry him, not with flowery words or grand gestures, but simply and directly, as was his way. "I love you," he said. "I think I have since that first day in the canyon when you were wounded and scared but still fighting. I want to build a life with you, Zara Holloway. Will you marry me?" Zara's answer was as direct as his proposal. "Yes," she said, joy bubbling up within her like a spring. "Yes, I will." They were married 2 days later in the fort's small chapel, with Colonel Browning giving the bride away and Lieutenant Wilson serving as Kirk's best man. Zara wore the blue dress she had been given upon their arrival, now altered to fit her properly. Kirk wore his marshal's uniform, polished and pressed for the occasion. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, the chapel filled with soldiers and their families who had come to know and respect the couple during their stay at the fort. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up was loud enough to startle the horses in the nearby stables. The celebration afterward was a joyous affair, with music provided by soldiers who played fiddle and harmonica, and dancing that lasted well into the night. Watching Kirk laugh with Lieutenant Wilson, his face more relaxed and open than she had ever seen it, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. They had faced death together and emerged not just alive but stronger, their bond forged in danger and cemented in love. 2 days after the wedding, they departed Fort Kearny, heading southwest toward the Colorado Territory. Kirk had resigned his commission with the Marshals, though he had agreed to testify at Dobbs' trial when the time came. They traveled with a small wagon containing their few possessions, plus supplies and tools they would need to establish their new home. The journey was not without its challenges, whether difficult terrain, the occasional wary encounter with natives, but after what they had already survived together, these obstacles seemed manageable. They moved at their own pace, taking time to appreciate the beauty of the land they passed through, to learn each other's rhythms and habits outside of crisis. By late fall, they had reached a valley in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains that took Zara's breath away. A clear stream ran through meadows of tall grass with pine forests climbing the surrounding slopes. In the distance, snow-capped peaks pierced the sky. "This is it," Kirk said as they stood looking out over the valley. "What do you think?" Zara turned to him, her heart full. "It's perfect," she said. "It's home." They built their cabin before the first snow, working from dawn until dusk with the help of a few neighbors from the nearest settlement. It was small but solid, with a stone fireplace and windows that caught the morning sun. Kirk constructed furniture, a bed, a table, chairs, while Zara planted a small garden and learned to preserve food for the winter ahead. News reached them occasionally via travelers or supply runs to the nearest town. Harlan Dobbs had been convicted and sentenced to hang. His criminal empire had collapsed, his ill-gotten properties returned to their rightful owners or sold to honest settlers. The railroad would still come, but now with fair compensation to those whose land it crossed. As winter settled over their valley, Zara and Kirk found rhythm in their new life. Mornings were for chores tending to their small herd of cattle, maintaining the cabin, hunting, or fishing for food. Afternoons might find Kirk working on expanding the cabin, or Zara teaching the children of neighboring homesteaders who came to their home 3 times a week for lessons. Evenings were for themselves, reading aloud by firelight. Kirk had surprised Zara with a trunk of books as a wedding gift, planning for the future or simply enjoying each other's company. The dangers they had faced seemed distant now, like a story that had happened to someone else. Spring came to the valley in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. Their herd had increased with the birth of calves, and Zara's garden flourished, One evening, as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains, Zara turned to Kirk with a smile. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." The joy that bloomed on Kirk's face was answer enough, but he pulled her close, his kiss conveying what words could not. When he finally drew back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "A family," he said wonderingly. "Our family," Zara nodded, her own eyes filled with happy tears. "Our future," she corrected gently. "All because you cared whether we lived or died that day." Kirk smiled, the memory of that desperate moment in the canyon now transformed into the foundation of their life together. "I told you we weren't dying that day," he said. "Best promise I ever kept." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, planning and dreaming for the child who would join their family in the autumn. Above them, stars appeared one by one in the vast Colorado sky, witnesses to the life they had built from danger and despair. Inside Zara's pocket was a small wooden horse given to her by a boy named Thomas on a farm in Montana. She had kept it as a talisman, a reminder of kindness in dark times. Now it would be the first toy for their child, a link to the journey that had brought them here. No regrets. Kirk asked softly, his arm around her shoulders. Zara leaned into his embrace, thinking of all they had endured and all that lay ahead, the challenges of frontier life, the joys of watching their child grow, the comfort of facing whatever came together. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every step led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." In the years that followed, their family grew first with the birth of their daughter, whom they named Martha after the kind farmer's wife who had helped them, and later with a son they called Daniel, honoring the man who had given them shelter when they needed it most. Their ranch prospered, as did the small community that grew around it. Zara continued to teach, eventually establishing a proper schoolhouse where children from miles around came to learn. Kirk, respected for his fairness and passed as a lawman, often helped mediate disputes among neighbors and advised on matters of law and justice. They never forgot the dangers they had faced or the lessons they had learned, that life was precious, that courage meant facing fear rather than feeling none, that love could flourish even in the harshest circumstances. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the house was still, they would sit together on their porch and look up at the stars, remembering a desperate day by a canyon when a wounded woman had said, "No one cares if we die," and a determined marshal had answered, "I do, so we ain't dying today." Words that had saved their lives, words that had given them everything that followed.